Welcome to the 10-Minute Treasure. My name is Jeff Pospisil. I have been gone for a while from doing new videos, but I'm back at it, and I've been getting a lot of questions recently from the Global Methodist churches about clergy compensation. So I figured I would go ahead and put this video out, and maybe it'll be a help to you understanding the clergy compensation form, knowing where to look for benefits information. So hopefully this is a help. If it is, feel free to like and share with those that may need it. All right, so here I am. I'm on the Upper Midwest Conference's webpage for the Global Methodist Church. And one of the things I really like about the Global Methodist denomination is at least they've tried to standardize things, at least across the U.S. If they're able to standardize clergy benefits across the whole world, that would be awesome. But it does make it a lot easier. When I was with the United Methodist, every different conference had a different way of calculating everything, basically, and a different way of reporting things. So if you go to, in the Upper Midwest, a lot of other conferences will have something similar, but if you go to resources and forms, they have their annual charge conference forms packet. And if you open that up, you're going to find one of the things in there is a clergy compensation form, which happens to look very, very similar to the form for the the General Church put out. So if you go to globalmethodist.org, and I'll put links in the description, by the way, go to menu. Way over here under resources is benefits and insurance, and they have a great benefits team. There's a lot of good information here. So like who is required to be on pension or retirement? Who's required to be on health insurance? What are the, how can you opt out? Who can opt out of these things? So great information right here. I really, really appreciate this little chart. There's a lot of good guides, member guide, pastor contribution worksheet. So that's retirement, clergy responsibility chart. So this is a really good one too, as we changed benefits to Guidestone not that long ago. Really good chart on who pays for what. I really like that one. Another one that I like too is this Section 125 agreement. So kind of works alongside your clergy compensation form, which I'm going to go over in just a second. But it just lays it out. Here's the monthly amount. Here's when it started, and sign it off. And then you just file that away in your records. And that way you know for sure how much you're supposed to withhold from a pastor or a participant's paycheck. So the other good resource, I'm going to just show this real quick while I'm here, is Guidestone's Global Methodist Church page. So they also have, a webinar right here to help guide the person that's doing the payroll or doing the benefits. They have different guides, different frequently asked questions. So really good information. I encourage you to go there. Also super helpful if you just email them, they will help you. I should have said that also on the benefits side. You email them right here and they will help you. Sign up for the benefits bulletin as well. So kind of hitting everything there, but anyway, hopefully you know that there's help out there for you. So I'm going to go ahead and switch on over. This is the spreadsheet they use, and it is just like if you click print preview, it is pretty much exactly like the one that we had for the that you saw for the Upper Midwest Conference when you go to print it. I appreciate, by the way, at the very bottom, they put give a copy of this form to the person responsible for payroll. So key. It's hard enough to do payroll for clergy no matter what, but it's almost impossible when you don't have all the information. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and fill this out like I was doing it myself. And you'll be able to see how this works, and hopefully it'll answer a couple of questions. So I'm just going to fill in some fake information. So first and second GMC is what I'll do. It's a 2-point charge. Status. So when you click on this, you see this little arrow, drop-down arrow, and that allows you to pick elder, deacon, lay minister, senior, so that's a retired pastor, supply pastor, or other, which means I don't know. Let's go ahead and make this one an elder. And the different statuses determine your benefits that you're eligible for. The full-time, part-time, which is either half-time, three-quarter time, or quarter time. So I'll choose full-time. And again, that also determines which benefits you're eligible for. Pastor's name is Pastor Dan. And effective date. So that's the effective date when the changes in compensation are. So for most of people, that's going to be January 1 of 2025. And then you go over here. One of the base salary. So that's like your cash salary that you would just normally pay to them before any withholdings. Other, a lot of times this is blank, but some churches may provide some kind of taxable benefits. So we're looking mainly at taxable benefits, such as like the Social Security allowance, or if your pastor doesn't have health insurance, maybe you do a health insurance allowance on the side. So I'm going to leave that blank. And if you do put something in there, I'd encourage you to put a description. And then the designated housing exclusion. So this is money. So you're going to pay this pastor, Pastor Dan, $50,000. But any unreimbursed housing expenses, the pastor is able to keep the receipts and write that off. So I'm just going to plug in something. I encourage you, unless your tax professional tells you otherwise, usually plug in something, and it's better to be high than too low. There's no penalty for being too high, but you will pay more than your fair share of taxes if it's too low. Pastor, are they in a parsonage? Yes or no? And again, this is another one with that drop down arrow. So yes or no. And I'm going to say yes. If I put no, the big thing that this does is it changes the calculation on the pension. So if I was to choose no, you see how that changed. And then it would look at the housing allowance instead of the value of the parsonage. So, but I'm going to choose yes. And so this retirement, that was, hopefully you saw that was the number that was changing. This is so far the base amount, the minimum amount for retirement that the church is going to provide, because they also match up to 5%. So this number represents the base amount that a church is responsible for a pastor's retirement. It's 5% of their compensation, including an adjustment for housing. But then there's also an additional match up to an additional 5% of what the pastor contributes. So watch this number. It says 3125. And if the pastor decides to do 5%, that's right down here. And now we'll see that it doubled. So it's a full 10% of their compensation adjusted for housing. If they did 2.5%, and again, it goes down. But if they do 10%, not 100%, 10%, the church's portion, it's going to be between 5 and 10% of the pastor's compensation adjusted for housing. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just change that to 5%. This tax sheltered one, so it's either before tax is what we used to always call it, or Roth. And I encourage most pastors to go ahead and use the before tax one or the tax sheltered one. Health insurance. A lot of these ones, there's a lot of different, you see the formulas up here. So it is looking at those statuses and everything else that you did. This is not a protected worksheet, so you can just overwrite it if you know maybe that your pastor's eligible, but for whatever reason the formula is not working right. Go ahead and just write over top of it. So is your pastor eligible? So if they can't opt out, or is it just the pastor? Again, that drop-down box, the pastor and a spouse, the pastor and one or more kids, or is it the full family? So the pastor, kids, and spouse. And you can see the different amounts pop up automatically when you choose it. So I'm going to say it's just the pastor. Long-term disability insurance. So this is where you could just basically estimate from your last billing. You'd probably be fine. But there is a calculation. So if you go to life and disability rates, that's a little small, isn't it? Let me see if I can zoom on in. But there is a calculation. So it says take their salary. So monthly salary. So here, what our salary was, I'm going to see if I can do this well. All right, I got a calculator up and I'll drag it over here. So take their monthly salary. So I had $50,000 divided by 12. My monthly salary was $4,167. It says divide that by 100 and then multiply it by 0.49. And that gives you your monthly premium. So I'm going to then multiply that by 12 and it gives me a total of $245. So that's what I'd put here, $245. Then there is the life and accident insurance. So let's go ahead and look at that. All right, let me close that thing here. Life and accident insurance, it's just going to be $975 per month. That's life insurance. $125 per month for accident and disability. And then there are spouse rates and child rates. So I chose a single pastor, maybe for a good reason. So that's $975 plus $1.25. So 9.75 plus 1.25. Enter. That's $11 a month times 12 months equals $132. Do not include optional coverages. So there's supplemental coverage, there's optional coverages. So this is just those mandatory ones. And this is the one where it's a good idea, again, to go back to that sheet that they developed here, the clergy responsibility chart. So that is a really good sheet. So if you look at these codes, we're just looking at these ones that have a yes. I know that's really small, but it is what it is. Accountable reimbursement plan. So this one, you know, it's just nice to have all the compensation in one place to know what you are paying for a pastor. So this would be stuff like if you have some place in your budget for mileage, maybe you have a place in your budget for eating out with members, you know, that kind of thing, an allowance for that. Maybe it's continuing ed, something like that. So when you add those together, just plug them in here. But it's kind of nice to have that there just so we think about it. So how much is our pastor allowed to spend for continuing education? Or how much are we budgeting for mileage? And so that way you can have that discussion. So that gives us our total cost for the pastor, for the parish. And we have two different churches. Remember, we have First Church and Second Church. So this ends up actually being on page 2. And you got to spell second right. And now when I plug in the different percentages, that'll show the split that each one is responsible for. And again, you can have some kind of different agreement, but at least this makes the math somewhat easier. If you're looking at the cost of the pastor, this is kind of what it is. This doesn't include the cost of like maybe parsonage expenses, and maybe you want to include that there. So if I was going to want to include other expenses, maybe I want to do, we have an agreement on how we split utilities. So I'll throw in $3,000. I don't know how well that is, but parsonage utilities, if we split that at the same rate as everything else, I'll plug that in there. And that way it calculates it on that. And you could adjust these however you need. This second part, you're really probably going to want to wait until after open enrollment. But there are the different rates. Those are on the Global Methodist website. But you're going to be able to figure out exactly what your pastor's share of the premium is. And if there's an HSA and all that kind of stuff. And once you are able to fill that in, it'll help you figure out their paycheck. So whether they're paid semi-monthly, monthly, bi-weekly, weekly, it'll go ahead and calculate that. If you have any taxes withheld, whether it's state or federal, or I guess state and federal, it'll also show you how things are going to be billed. So you're going to be billed $875 for the church's share of health insurance per month, $520.83 per month for retirement. All right, so I'm just going to plug in some numbers, and these are annual amounts. So it says remember to use annual amounts. So after open enrollment, you can plug in some of these numbers. So what's the premium minus the church's share? And I'm just going to plug in something. And HSA, this is the pastor's contribution to the HSA. Some of the plans have a church portion to the HSA. So one of the things that I noticed, I don't think the spreadsheet does, but it probably should do, is the church is only responsible for this amount in total. I think if I had a chance to redo this, I would go ahead and subtract off this piece. So that way the church is still only responsible. These two together add up to 875. It's just that 791.67 goes to Guidestone and 83.33 goes to EBC for the HSA. I think that's correct. But kind of non-committal. But it'll also give you a head start on your W-2, and you can kind of use these similar numbers for your 941s as well. All right, so that brings me basically to the end. I'm going to give a quick plug, by the way, for getting a clergy tax expert to maybe take care of your payroll. If this has been one of those nightmare types of things, I would outsource it to somebody else. I started recently working for Ledgers Inc., and they have some clergy tax experts, kind of like myself, that will help you run your payroll correctly. Because I don't know. I talk to a lot of people, and it's confusing and it's frustrating, and I would rather trust somebody else to do it. And by the time you pay somebody like Ledgers, it not only takes care of all that grief, but then it's also including the cost of maybe W-2s and 1099s and other things like that you would normally be paying for. So you might not even be paying that much more, but you're definitely getting a good benefit. So I'm just going to plug that. I'll put that link also in the description. Okay, so I went through a lot of stuff here, and it was kind of longer, but this compensation stuff, clergy compensation, is kind of tricky, and then every denomination has its own little wrinkles. So if you got to watch it more than once, I wouldn't blame you. Another thing too is I will put all those links in the description to help you along your way, and make sure also I'll put a link to the website that has all the conference websites, so that way maybe it's a little bit easier to find your own conference specific stuff. All right, till next time, God bless.